This is an argument for the pursuit of meaningful work in the 21st century, which seeks to restore work to its sacred function. I remember watching Christopher Hitchens, a very acclaimed writer, journalist, a renowned combatant against organized religion, tell a packed-out auditorium in an interview his advice for young writers. And in being asked this question, he replied that writing couldn't be something that you sort of want to do. It has to be the thing that you must do, the thing that you cannot live without.
Advice to young writers. Give us just a little flavour of how you think people should conduct themselves.
Well, there are two kinds of advice for writers. One is, well, the first thing is if you want to write, it must be the thing, not that you want to do or would like to do, it must be the thing you feel you have to do. It must be that without which you could not live.
And my name is Joe Yulee. I'm a philosopher and I study vocations, our sacred callings. And I remember thinking that there's some irony present here, because he was someone who would oftentimes give these polemical, sort of hot take quips against religion. And yet when speaking about the craft of writing, he had this tone that was very similar to that of a preacher, to that you would hear at church. Someone who was very against religion saw writing as sacred. And I remember thinking that where religion had failed for him, writing had gone ahead and taken its place. Writing had become Hitchens' reason for living. Writing had become sacred. Now, I bring this up because we all have sacred work to do. Sacred work is work that is life-affirming. It's a reason for living. It's a reason to get up in the morning and be active and effortful and expressive in the world. It gives life. It doesn't take it away. And one way to think about this is if we reflect on the mythology of Prometheus. Prometheus, a god coming down from Mount Olympus, going against the orders of Zeus and the other gods of giving fire to humanity. And yet in this rebellion, storming down the mountain and giving fire to us, life force, what it meant was that we humans had been given something, and Prometheus was able to contribute and do the work that he was meant to do, and was able to give a divine contribution. And I bring this up because so often the sacred work that we're meant to bring forward into the world may defy the orders given by the world in which we find ourselves in. Work to do that nurtures areas that have been neglected, areas that we know we can actually contribute towards. And to really understand this, we first have to understand what sacred work truly is, because this concept is actually quite foreign to us. And when the words sacred and work appear next to each other, they appear to be from entirely different worlds. Now, when we're thinking of the word sacred, and we start to go into the etymology of the word, the Latin roots of it, we find words like holy, and we find words like purification, purity. When we think about the word work, opposite feelings arise. Normally, this word work is imbued with things like sorrow, heaviness, effort, without anything that really gives us and fulfills us on a deeper level. And so it can seem as though these are completely opposites, sacred and work. And work can also feel as though it's just there for survival. It's just there to keep us going, keep us having a roof over our head, and our heart beating. And it appears to be so opposite to sacred, and we can sort of see this in most people's coming home ritual. Right? You come home from work, you strip off your clothes, get rid of them, you go for a shower, you really get this work persona, expression off yourself because you feel as though you need to be clean before you can start to relax properly. In this coming home ritual that so many people do when they're unwinding after work is how most people experience modern day careers, this Kafka castle of recurring Mondays every single week, back at it again on loop again and again and again, and that's how they experience work. And what our society has done is it's pushed people in this direction so far, they've gone ahead and they've started to build these external shells to give off appearances, to sustain a reality, but inside there's a crumbling within. The soul isn't being nurtured. And this is why we have to restore sacred work, because humanity is starving for it. It needs it. It is desperate for it. It wants it. You will see out in the world people leaving jobs because they are burnt out, done, it doesn't fit. There is no option that properly fits them, and they're yearning for it. And what's interesting is by bringing these words together, sacred and work, the very thing that has constrained us, and the very thing that we see as this prison, this idea of work, is the very thing that can liberate us. And sacred work becomes and is our saving grace. My share of the work may be limited, but the fact that it is work makes it precious. Helen Keller, author and activist. Sacred work is not solely for the wealthy or the lucky. Every single person has sacred work to do on this earth. It is not purely reserved for the wealthy. It is not purely reserved for the young, who we might feel has more time than us. It is not purely for the monk living a religious life, and it is not purely for the artist who maybe they're lucky enough to go ahead and find someone that is able to give them a publishing deal or is able to support them financially. It is for everyone, because in the life of every single human, there's an unfolding pattern of existence, what we might call storylines. And one of the most important storylines that you will have running through your own life is, what are you here to contribute to humanity? And knowing the type of contribution, which we can also call this calling, that comes from us. That comes from within, and that is in every single human. And it is not based on what the economy desires or wants, right? The market conditions, it's not based on any of that. It's based on what is within you and what you are uniquely gifted for. And the irony is that eventually it actually lifts the economy, and the proper and true contribution that you're meant to bring into the world elevates everything on whole because of the rippling effect it has by you pursuing your calling. And if you really want to understand the impact that pursuing sacred work can have on the world, just imagine every single person that you know. Right? Some people might hate their work, some people might love their work. Every single person you know, like you imagine them, and now imagine them all pursuing sacred work that they feel deeply meant for, deeply called for, deeply pulled towards. And then you'll understand just how profound of an impact pursuing your calling and everyone else pursuing their own callings can have on the world. However, the problem is that right now, sacred work is hidden from us. We don't really understand it. We don't really see it. There's people that pursue it, absolutely. But on the whole, it's largely hidden. Now, as any biology student knows, we carry genes that may not be expressed in our physical traits. For example, we might have brown eyes, but we may also carry the gene for green eyes. Now, you wouldn't know it, but I carry the gene for green eyes because of my mother. And so the code is there, but it's just hidden. And in the same way, sacred work is within us and can be lying dormant. However, the major difference between eye color and sacred work is that we have the ability to pursue sacred work in the world and bring it into existence, which means that it's our choice. Now, perhaps the conditions, such as our parents' opinions, societal norms, the cost of living, it hinders our sacred work from appearing, but it's there. And we can think of this as a volcano that's lying dormant and it's waiting to activate. And to think that sacred work is just purely for just a few people is like thinking only a few people carry the code of eye color variation, which is why we must learn to see our work differently, with hues and shades and spectral pigments of who we are waiting to be painted into our everyday lives. If Bacchus ever had a color he could claim for his own, it should surely be the shade of tannin on drunken lips, of John Keats' purple-stained mouth, or perhaps even of Homer's dangerously wine-dark sea. Victoria Finlay, writer and journalist. Sacred work is an antidote to meaningless suffering. We do not need to go through all this pain at work. People suffer a tremendous amount at work for jobs and careers that they don't even feel at all called for. They don't really care about it, and they are really there to survive. And also, they don't really know any other way. Yet when we find our calling and we pursue it with devotion, we experience this reverence that washes over us because of the work itself. A serenity in our own outpouring. This gift, experiencing what we're here to do on this earth, it immerses us in a life worth living. So even if challenges do come, hardships do come, we know that it's worth it. We know why we should even bother going through those hard times. And this sustaining force helps us to persevere and overcome. In other words, when we pursue sacred work, we don't suffer in this meaninglessness. Rather, if we do suffer, it's because it's for something. The revealing of oneself, the other, the act in and of itself, and the transcendent, or we can sometimes call it the divine. And in thinking about this, we can think about a young Charlie Parker, who by many is one of the greatest jazz musicians of all time. Now, it's said that when Charlie Parker was a teenager, he would be playing his saxophone for 12 plus hours a day, and he just could not be stopped. He did it so much and so often and so loudly that his mother actually feared that they would be evicted because the neighbors were complaining, basically just telling him, can you shut up? Can you stop playing that damn horn? And he just couldn't stop playing it. And in thinking about this, we have to think about contextually, where is Charlie Parker in his life and in his surroundings at that point in time? Now, this is between around 1936 to 1940. And so war is a brewing. The Great Depression is still going on. there's high tensions because of racial inequality in the US. Now, if we take the horn away from Charlie Parker, right, he's suddenly situated in this world of harsh reality. A world that may have had him question, what is the purpose of this? What is the reason for this? What is the point of living? And yet, if we give him his music, if we give him his art, suddenly there is a reason for being. There is a reason to continue on. In other words, you take the horn away from Charlie Parker, and what do you have? Meaningless suffering. But you give the horn back to Charlie Parker, and suddenly you have the sustaining force that gives him meaning. I realized by using the high notes of the chords as a melodic line and by the right harmonic progression, I could play what I heard inside me. That's when I was born, a Charlie Parker jazz musician. Sacred work is the highest form of service. Our work is our ultimate contribution to humanity. And serving humanity is fundamentally human. If we think about humans that we admire, this might be icons like Joan Didion, Frida Kahlo. This might be up-and-comers, a Fred again, Ocean Vuong, a Doechii. This might be people that we know. This might be a peer, a friend, a family member. You'll notice that what you're admiring is their contribution to humanity. And we recognize that what they're doing is something of worth that is beyond the scope of the ordinary. And this is this reflective occurrence that instills us with inspiration. And it also instructs us with a sense of instruction. Because by admiring them and seeing what we admire them for, it gives us this metaphorical peak that we can look at and strive for. And this is always a higher aim, something beyond where we currently are. In other words, this admiration can help us to feel when our work is missing the sacred in it. Because giving to the world is not simply about just helping in any way we can. Contributing to the world requires us to help in the best way that we can. Which means that we cannot help fully if we are ignorant of ourselves, and we have to come into this deep congruence and awareness of what our soul truly desires. Because this is where our ultimate contribution is seated at birth, and this is where it awaits its bloom. And to give you an example of this, I remember around the year 2019, a young nurse around the age of 29, she came to me and was asking for my guidance when it comes to her career path, and she was having some issues because she felt as though she wasn't able to help people. And I remember her telling me and saying, I just don't feel as though I can help people in the way that I know I can help people. And I remember being stunned by that statement, because the nursing profession is one of those hallmark careers where if you want to go and help people, nursing's a good start, right? It's a place that people know, hey, these people are there to help, they contribute. And yet this nurse knew something was missing. Something wasn't there. And in working with her, I started to realize that we all have an ultimate contribution. And even if we're in these places that are meant to help, we have an ultimate way to help. It means that the nursing profession is for someone else. It's not for her. In other words, there was another form of work that was waiting for her that would allow her to give her ultimate contribution to humanity. I was changed forever by people's messages about what it had meant to them and the stories of their life and how they'd allowed it into their space. You can see the person at the show and you can meet them afterwards. And every song I make is endlessly inspired by that dialogue. I'm forever indebted to these people who make the music what it is. Fred again, record producer, singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and DJ, speaking with the fader. Sacred work sanctifies the self. Our work rids ourselves of who we are not and allows who we are to emerge. And it is in the consecrated effort of pursuing our sacred work that we come to know ourselves in ways that we could not have known without it, meaning that work is a part of our identity formation, which is why it's so important that we do work that is core to who we are as a person. Because if we do work that feels off-center, it creates a society where groups of people seek to rebalance it. And they rebalance it in such a way where they seek to reject any form of work. They even seek to reject the very word work itself. And this is where traditional work has just gone fundamentally wrong, because it seeks to contort individuals into identities that are not their own, and that causes this deep self-suffering. Sacred work, however, does the opposite, because sacred work asks us to bring parts of ourselves that are lying dormant within us forward into the world, into existence. Parts of ourselves that are raw, that are beyond our current capabilities, far-reaching, parts of ourselves that are just yearning to breathe. And the more that we do it, the more that we emerge. And we become proud of the work that we do and proud of the person that is staring at us back in the mirror. Now, during the Middle Ages, the building of cathedrals was seen as this reflection of faith, as well as this ability to pour the community's creative energy into form. And these beautifully crafted cathedrals can still be seen as this testament to that today. Now, the Notre Dame de Paris and the Milan Cathedral are two examples of these absolutely stunning cathedrals. And the latter one, the Cathedral in Milan, took about 579 years to complete. And you can only imagine the amount of planning, problem solving, long-term work that was required to bring these structures into existence. You know, an example of this is having to navigate using the mortar during the summer periods and the summer seasons, because if it got wet, it wouldn't quite work. Another example is ensuring you have the economic resources to be able to employ people for centuries to make sure that this thing happens. And we look at these monuments in awe, and humans travel from all around the world just to go ahead and view, witness, and see these cathedrals, take photos with them. And we can imagine, the immense amount of effort and work that it took to create these things and transform these materials into these elaborate structures. But we also need to imagine the transformations that occurred in the very people who worked on those cathedrals. I mean, the precision of placing those bricks, the creation of the sketches that were required and iterated over time to ensure that the right planning was done, the actual manual labor that it took to move, large stones into position. And every act required this deeper belief to see this thing through right until the end. And the people who worked on these cathedrals, they would have been fundamentally changed by the work itself. In other words, these cathedrals aren't simply these monuments of devotion. They're also a reflection of the inner sanctification that can take place within individuals when they do the work that they're meant to do. A rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single man contemplates it, bearing within him the image of a cathedral. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, author of The Little Prince. Helpful questions to ask yourself. Question 1. Do you believe doing work that you love is for a chosen and lucky few? Question 2. What activities do you naturally pursue which make life feel worth living? Question 3. Who are you inspired by in this world, and what do they contribute to humanity? And question 4. What types of work have you ever done, paid or unpaid, that gave you the space to become someone you were proud of being? And we all have sacred work to do that is life-affirming. And that is why if we don't know what it is, we have to find it. And if we do know what it is, we have to ensure, deepen our roots and make sure that no one sways us from it. Because by doing our sacred work here on this earth, we contribute to humanity, we sanctify the self, and we find the divine here on earth. Remembering through the lines of the late, great Christopher Hitchens,
it must be the thing not that you want to do or would like to do, it must be the thing you feel you have to do. It must be that without which you could not live.
Now, if you're interested in learning more about what your sacred work is, then you'll want to go ahead and check out our summer school that's coming up in July. And in July, we are actually hosting for the very first time a summer school within our Career Archetypes community. Now, our community is ongoing, and anybody that wants to learn how to choose the right career path with conviction by unearthing their career archetype is welcome to join at any time. However, in July, on the 14th, we are going to be having a very special container within our community whereby we're going to be hosting live Q&As every single week and doing study sessions so that you can go through this process of coming to a realization of what your calling is alongside other members at the exact same time. And so this process is an 8-week process. And during those 8 weeks, we really gather all this self-knowledge. We go through your own personal life mythology. We do some personality exploration, including astrological work, including depth psychology. We take you through action therapy. We find out what your different barriers are internally, and we look at them, and then we go through what's called action therapy to make sure that these aren't going to hold you back from your calling. And you get this full perspective of who you are, which will bring you into connection with what your career archetype is, and that'll give you an understanding of what your direction is. And then we look at things like money. How do you make sure that you can bring resources in for yourself so that you can pursue this in the modern world? And we also look at what are the very first steps that you need to take to actually make this happen. We ground it in reality. And so if you're interested in that and you're interested in being around others who are pursuing their calling in the world, you can go ahead and check out the link below.